Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the QBSN podcast, episode 9, our first episode back in the second semester. I'm here with men's ice hockey beat reporter Nick Olsen for Q30. Behind the desk, we got Andrew Goodness on audio.
What's up?
Trent producing as always, and a great episode for you guys today, so let's get right into it. First, we're going to go over Quinnipiac Winter Athletics, a little overview, kind of the major stories, what happened over break. And then we're going to hop into breaking the ice. We're talking men's ice hockey, CT ice tournament. Nick's got a lot of good stuff for us today. So let's go. Men's basketball now 14-8 overall, 7-4 in the MAC, tied with Marist for fourth. They split games with Manhattan. This was a big story. Tom Pecora and John Gallagher, the head coach for Manhattan, both got ejected in the first game at Manhattan. There was a harsh foul on Asim Jones, kind of sparked some conversation between those two. They started yelling at each other. No hands were thrown, but they both got ejected. Then in game 2 at the bank, it was a lot calmer. Everybody was anticipating the handshake line after the game. Nothing happened. Big disappointment, but two stand-up guys, so it's all right. Women's basketball now 16-4, 11-0 in the MAC. They're second today. The day we're filming, they're playing Fairfield at Fairfield. Huge game
Massive.
On ESPNU. And then the 14th coming up, that will be the Q30 and QBSN Bobcat game day. I'll be on the call with Brittany Brown-Liebman, who's been on the podcast. I believe your video running.
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there.
Awesome. So that'll be a lot of fun. Tune into that February 14th. Quinnipiac versus Fairfield, women's basketball. That'll be a fun game. And then, women's hockey, 21-5. Not much has changed. 21-5-2, 11-4-1, first in the ECAC. They're running the show.
Running business.
Not much, yeah. Like before break, they were running business, and not much has changed. Felicia Frank, huge week for her. She won ECAC Hockey Goalie of the Week. And Michaela Watson, ECAC Hockey Defender of the Week. She also had the first hat trick by a Bobcat defender in over 15 years. So that's also big news. Some more big news for women's hockey. Friendship Series, they went to Belfast, Ireland. They tied with Boston University in Game 1, 2-2. That one went to shootouts. And then in Game 2, that was Game 1. In Game 2, they beat 5th seed Minnesota Duluth. They crushed them 3-1, and then they just crushed 12 seed Cornell 4-0 last Saturday.
Yeah, they've been playing some really good hockey.
Yeah,
so.
They're on a roll, and it's been a lot of fun to watch. It's been great for the university, and it's been great for Quinnipiac hockey because everybody talks about the men's team, but the women's team. A big story around the university has been how do we get people to those games.
Mm-hmm. Play good hockey.
Yeah,
Simple.
Some awesome hockey. Top 10 hockey in the nation right there. So
always.
Yeah, those are the kind of main storylines. Now we can hop into Breaking the Ice, fan favorite segment. So glad to have you here, Nick. Men's hockey 19-5-2, 10-2 in the ECAC. They're first. So talk to me about CT Ice. Game 1 versus Sacred Heart. They dominated 5-1. Didn't have a scoreless period. So go ahead. Tell me what you saw.
Yeah, that was a really good game by the Bobcats up and down the lineup. I thought it was a full team effort. I think they played a full 60 minutes, including the defense. It wasn't just a lot of the time recently, especially in 2026. It's been a lot of first-year contributors, but I think up and down the lineup we had a lot of contributors. Anthony Cipollone got his first of the year. Sarah Bowen got back in the lineup. We saw Will Gilson goal, obviously an Ethan Wittenbach goal as well. And aside from that, too, their defense shut down the top line for Sacred Heart. Felix Trudeau came into the game second in the nation in goals per game. Didn't find the score sheet. On the other side, in the goaltending matchup, Tegan Kendrick, he played well for Sacred Heart. He's a top. I think he's in the mid-range for average goaltending stats. And then for the Bobcats, Dylan Silverstein played well. So, yeah, just up and down the lineup, great game. A game they had to win against Sacred Heart moving on to the championship series. And then obviously the second game, we all know what happened there. So
right. Now, talk to me about offensively in that first game. what worked? What were they doing? Was it puck movement? Was it spacing?
I think that a lot of the times what Quinnipiac does well is they control the pace of play, and they don't let the other team get the momentum. And so Sacred Heart really had no momentum going for them. Even when they would grab a power play, Quinnipiac would kill it off and grab the momentum right back. And so it was that puck control in the defensive zone, which allowed them to break out. And they saw a couple fast break rushes like the Witter goal. Wittenbach scored off a rush, and Gilson as well. And so you see a couple of those, and then they also just dominate in the offensive zone as well. And so you saw what I think was, or Cipollon's goal in the first period was off a rebound in front, off sustained time of period in the offensive zone. He was able to bang it home. So it was just a full offensive domination all game long for the Bobcats.
Great. Now let's talk about game 2. Going up against 13 seed UConn. They lost 2-4. One of those 4 was a open net.
Yeah.
Now, first period, UConn 1 goal, Quinnipiac none. Second period, Quinnipiac 2 goals, UConn none. Third period, that's where UConn ran away with it.
Yeah.
3 goals. That was one of the empty netters. Now, Quinnipiac's goals, 1 from Vidicek, 1 from Pelosi. Talk to me a little bit about that first period, because it was really back and forth.
Yeah.
No one looked like they had total control of the game, and then Bobcats on a power play made a mistake.
So when I was able to speak to Rand Pecknold after the game, he mentioned that he thought their first period was actually really good. He thought they played really well up until that power play, which they gave up the shorthanded goal. And it was a couple mistakes. Obviously, Ethan Wittenbach with the mistake, which led to the shorthanded goal. But he said they'd learned. And he also mentioned he had high praise, which I'll get into for the first years, especially Marcus Vidicek, Ethan Wittenbach. But maybe they didn't handle the moment too well. But it was that first period where they did, and they played well. But then where the moment came apart, where they gave up that shorthanded goal kind of thing, it kind of fell apart. And another thing, UConn played a very strong defensive system where they didn't allow Quinnipiac to control the puck. Like I mentioned, where they control the game super well. They kind of had a lot of puck possession. And it was a very ping-pong, or Pecknold actually used a, quote, football game, where it was just back and forth, where the puck was moving a lot. And so Quinnipiac wasn't able to control that, weren't playing to their system, and they actually fell into UConn's system, and that's why UConn was able to control the game then, and then especially in their defensive zone, allowed nothing. And those fast break opportunities, Quinnipiac had none. Both their goals were off pesky rebounds in front of the net, and they had to work really hard to even get to the net, and obviously Tyler Muslek played unbelievable.
Yeah, I think that was one of the major points as well, is how good UConn's goalie played.
Yeah.
I mean, he was
Yeah, fun fact actually about Muslek. I got this stat just before. Quinnipiac coach Rand Pecknold cut him from the 2023 World Juniors team. He then transfers to UConn last year, beats them in CT Ice with 35 saves, beats them again this year in CT Ice in the championship. So a little bit of bad history for Pecknold and Muslek there. So
maybe one of his few mistakes as a head coach.
Yeah.
Now we're talking period 1. Let's go to period 2. That's where the Bobcats took control, the Vidicek, Pelosi. But talk to me about those goals, and just, you talked about it a little bit, how they were really hard fought and just rebound.
Again, I thought that the Bobcats played well in that period. I think, again, it was that back and forth kind of period, but they worked super hard. I really like the play of Aaron Schwartz as well. He looked like he was just kind of barreling in every time he's out there in the ice, and Pecknold really put him out there a lot. And he played that fast break where he kind of charged into the zone. We saw, I think it was on the Pelosi goal, where he charges in the zone, gets around 2 defenders, get the shot off, and then Pelosi's able to find the rebound. And so it was both those goals, the Marcus Vidicek goal, which he got the tip in front, and then his own rebound in the crease to put them or tie the game at 1 at that point. So both the goals were just hard-working goals. They weren't going to score on Muslek just with shots from the point or shots from the outside, and they weren't going to get those fast breaks with UConn's defense. So they really had to work for those goals, and they played, again, well in the second. It was just UConn's defense just was better. Like they just played better, and they were there for the moment, where maybe Quinnipiac wasn't ready for the moment, but they will be now. They will be coming up for the ECAC playoffs or even the NCAA playoffs.
Yeah. Now, we talked about Rand after the game. Did he mention anything about the turnovers? He talked about it was a really back-and-forth game, kind of like a football game, he said. Did he talk about the turnovers? Because it felt like just watching a lot of turnovers.
So I actually asked him. I said personally, how do you now moving forward gear up and make sure you're ready for each game through the rest of the ECAC schedule? And he said they can't play like tonight, right? They can't be that football game. They got to limit those chances and those turnovers as well, and they got to go back to their style of controlling that puck. And so, but again, to my point before, he liked the way they played, just UConn played better. And so I don't think he really wasn't that upset. He thought, for one, the first years weren't there for the moment, and that it was a little bit sloppy play. He also mentioned that there was a lot of face-off violations, and he mentioned earlier on, too, that he wasn't going to mention one thing that he wasn't happy about. And we saw during the game that he was kind of yelling at the refs at one point. And so we won't touch on that, though, because if Rand didn't want to touch on that. So we don't know exactly what happened, but he wasn't happy with that either in the post-game press conference.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely saw that as well. And, that's just part of the game. Just gotta work through it. But period 3, that's where UConn took control. Their defense turned to offense, 3 goals. Tell me, did Rand talk about that at all? Was there any...
So we didn't really touch on the third period as much. I think it was more in that press conference where we're looking for the positives. But from a beat reporter's perspective in the press box for that game, I thought in the third period that the defense kind of collapsed a little bit and that they were on their toes for a lot of that period and they were hemmed in their zone a lot. They had no offensive opportunity. I'm going to get the stat right now, how many shots on goal they had in that third period. But again, it's to my point where they were hemmed in their zone a lot and UConn just gave out those tired legs, and they were able to put 2 goals and then an empty netter in the back of the net. And so a little too late there for the Bobcats. I'm going to get the stat right now for shots on goal in the third period. Let me just check.
While you do that, I believe that it was 2-2 on power plays for both teams, and it was 4 minutes for both teams as well. So both 2-minute penalties for each team. So there wasn't any there wasn't any advantage that way for either team. The one advantage was that the Bobcats threw it away with that first power play that led to the empty net or the fast break goal.
All right, so I wasn't able to find the exact stat, but I know that the shots on goal were low, or especially the high danger opportunities in that third period were low, and so UConn really controlled in the defensive zone, and then, as you mentioned before, turned defense into offense, and were able to convert. And their chances as well weren't perfect, and they weren't like fast break opportunities. I mean, the goal that gave them the 3-2 lead, that was a good goal, and it was just a little bit of a sloppy play from the Quinnipiac defense. It was kind of, I forgot who it was, but they were flat-footed, and they worked into the offensive zone, and there was a rebound off Marinov into the back of the net. So, not perfect defense in the third period, and then fast-paced and just defense into offense from UConn really turned the tide of the game.
Right. Did he say anything about Marinov's play?
No, he didn't touch Marinov's play.
Because I didn't think it was bad at all.
I didn't think
that breakaway was tough, but that's
not his fault. I think there's one goal that you could say he should have made the save on, but listen, we were able to speak to Elliot Groenwald, Bobcats defenseman, after the shoe game, going into the game against where there would be Yale or UConn, and he said, and I quote, "It's like an NCAA tournament game, or if we were in Lake Placid, so that's kind of how we're treating it." So they weren't going in treating this like a regular season tournament. They were going in, and Rand said after the UConn game as well that his guys love this, and they play for this, and they play hard for this, and so they want to win. And so you can't, in any playoff game, you can't fault the goal.
Right.
And so, you could say he should have made the saves, but, I think the defense should have been better in that third period.
Absolutely, yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, looking down the road, end of the regular season approaching, and then they're going to get into ECAC play and eventually NCAAs. So let's talk about ECAC tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Who in the regular season that we have left or in the tournament do you think poses the biggest threat?
So I have 2 different answers. So regular season, I think their biggest threat right now on their schedule is Cornell.
Okay.
Cornell is getting hot at the right time. They've won a lot recently. A lot of their key guys are stepping up as well, and they're creeping back up into the top of the standings. Let me just pull up the ECAC standings right now. Yeah, so Cornell right now, they have the same amount of games played as Quinnipiac, and they're 2 points behind. So that's a overtime or regulation. If they win in regulation, they can jump in front of Quinnipiac, and overtime win would tie them right now because Quinnipiac sits at 28 points. And so Cornell is getting hot at the right time. I'm going to pull up their full schedule as well.
So, yeah, Quinnipiac, here are the top 5 ECAC hockey standings. Quinnipiac first, Harvard second, Dartmouth third, Cornell fourth, Princeton fifth. And then Yale, who was last in the beginning of the season, has now jumped to sixth.
So in their last couple of games, Cornell, they've beat Harvard, they beat Dartmouth, they lost to Quinnipiac, but they beat Princeton, they swept Alaska, they swept Nebraska, Omaha. And so they're playing really well right now. They beat St. Lawrence. So in their last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games, 1 loss, and it's come to Quinnipiac. And so I still see that as the biggest threat for the Bobcats, though, because they're playing so well. And you come later in the season, the guys are fired up. They want to win, and they want to get – and having a top seed in the ECAC is super important, right? Especially that 1 seed. The 1 seed gets you a bye, and you automatically move on to that second round out of that kind of like the play-in first round. Right. And so Quinnipiac, I think, still will capture that 1 seed just because – they almost had the lead. They have 2 games ahead of Harvard, who sits 1 point behind them. And they have 1 game ahead of Dartmouth, who I think, by the way, we'll get into it, is their biggest threat in the playoffs. But for regular season, I still think it's Cornell just because they're playing super well right now. But you also asked who their biggest threat is in the tournament, right. And I still think it's Dartmouth. Dartmouth has a top goal scorer in the NCAA in Hayden Stravoff, who is first in the NCAA in goals per game. So he's been the only problem with Dartmouth, though, is that they started crazy hot, right? They had one of the best records, right, not just in the ECAC, but the NCAA.
National, yeah.
And since their loss to Quinnipiac earlier this year, in the calendar year 2026, they're 2-2-1. And they've lost to some teams they probably haven't or shouldn't lose to. And but a lot of their success you can be accredited to their goaltending tandem, which has been probably the best 2 goalies in the NCAA. So they do a split goaltending tandem where they don't play a goalie back-to-back nights. So you'll see the Bobcats roll at Marinov maybe on a back-to-back weekend. Maybe even that weekend, Colgate, Cornell, they'll roll at Marinov back-to-back. Right. But this year, thus far, they've rolled Silverstein Friday nights, Marinov Saturday nights, and it's worked. Silverstein actually hasn't lost this season. So that'll be an interesting debate going into ECAC who they should start. I still think the keys go to Marinov. But for Dartmouth, Emmett Crote, 4th in the NCAA in goals against average, and they also roll out Rowan Clark, who's 19th in the NCAA in goals against average. So they roll out these 2 goalies that have both been playing really well. And the only problem is once you get to the playoffs again, you have to pick one. But the thing for Dartmouth is they might not pick one. They might roll out 2 goalies in the playoffs, which could be tough because then you get one goalie on one night, then you get the next goalie on the other night, and whoever's you could run into the hot hand net, and for the Bobcats they could lose that game. So we'll have to see. I don't know. I don't know. It's either Cornell or Dartmouth in the playoffs. I think in the regular season it's still Cornell. Right. I think it can go either way though in the playoffs. I think Dartmouth is the team. Their depth as well. They have a lot of top goal scorers on their squad, especially Hayden Stavroff, obviously. And so I think it's the Bobcats' conference to lose heading into the NCAA playoffs.
Now, let's bring it back to the Bobcats. They are a strong team. They're 19-5-2, right? They are 10-2 in the ECAC. What are their weak points? Because they have dropped some games. They dropped Brown. They dropped Yale. Games that they should not have lost.
Well, yeah, so they beat Yale in overtime that game. Or they beat Brown in overtime 3-2. Right. They lost to Yale, though, the night before. It was earlier in the season where they were losing games, which they really shouldn't have lost. Like that Yale game, they should not have lost. They should not have went to overtime against Brown. They should not have lost to Union. They should not have went to a shootout against Alaska. They shouldn't have lost to Alaska in the Icebreakers tournament. But then you turn around and you see opening night, they beat BC. They beat BU. But before BU's... Honestly, BU has not played... Since that Quinnipiac game... They came into the Quinnipiac game playing all right. This was mid-November. Since then, they've dropped. They're not even in the tournament picture right now. This is a team that was in the Frozen Four last... They were in the championship game last season. Right now, they wouldn't even make the NCAA playoffs. So that's a huge turnaround for BU. So obviously, but still give credit to the Bobcats for beating them when they were still, playing at their peak. They also beat Maine, or they tied with Maine that first game and then shut them out the next night. So they've beaten ranked teams at that point. I think Maine was ranked number 15 their home opening weekend. So they were beating the teams that, maybe they should have lost to, but then they couldn't beat Yale.
Right.
That was the first time.
It was in the beginning of the season.
It was the first time since February 7th, February of 2018 that they lost to Yale.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing that everyone was talking about was they're playing so well against ranked opponents and then dropping.
Yeah, and then they come into 2026 and they go on a heater. They win 7 in a row, and then obviously they lose to UConn on Saturday night in the CTI's championship. So, but they're still playing well. I still think it's their division to lose, but their flaw, like you mentioned, I think their one biggest flaw is their special teams. So if you look at last season their power play was atop of the NCAA. I think it was top 5 in both power play and penalty kill. But they almost relied on it a little too much. They scored 135 goals in total. 30% came on the power play. Now this season, they've already scored 105 goals, only 22% on the power play. So, and their power play is working. It's 19th ranked in the NCAA, and their penalty kill is ranked 14th. So maybe not up to Rand Pecknold's standards. It could maybe get a little bit higher. But I think that it's better that they're not relying too much on the power play, Trent.
And I feel like, too, back in, you look at episode 1, when me and Pat had kind of talked, I feel like I had kind of brought that up, too, where I noticed that one of the areas where this Bobcats team could really benefit was, getting better on that power play and being more productive there. So,
yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily a bad power play. I think it could be better. And I think a lot of their success, like I mentioned, becomes from them controlling the game and then those fast break outlets. And so where the power play, it comes from sustained zone pressure, and where the Bobcats still succeed. I mean, they play well in all areas of the ice, but the power play's got to be better. And the kill. I think the kill is the main thing that has to be better. The penalty kill, we've seen a lot of big power play goals be led up by this team, and so it's not so much the power play that needs to be better, it's the penalty kill that needs to be better, which is ranked 19th in the NCAA. So that's got to creep up to the maybe 12 to 8 range come NCAA playoff time.
Right. I know Trent was talking about this earlier on before break, and we were kind of talking about if the Bobcats can get to the point where their percentages on the power play are really good to where teams don't want to take a penalty against you, that's when they're at their best.
And then they try to be too disciplined. That's when you actually get more power plays. And so if they get to that point, then they could really expose those games, which is super important in those tight. Every game is going to be super tight. You're not going to. I mean, obviously in the playoffs, you're not going to get a lot of power plays, but when you do, they're super important to convert on, especially as you move on further in the NCAA tournament.
Right. And like we saw against UConn, right?
Yeah.
It was eighth seed in Quinnipiac versus 13th in UConn, and two power plays each.
Exactly.
So, and UConn took advantage of one of them, and that ultimately ended up winning the game for them because the other one was an empty net goal.
Yeah. I still think they finish first in the ECAC. They get that 1 seed. They have a home playoff game, and then they ride it out. So we'll have to see. And I think it's the year. I think this team's hungry to finally win a Whitelaw, which they haven't done since 2016.
Right.
So,
well, we'll let time tell, right?
Yep.
Time will tell. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome episode. This was great. Thank you to Andrew Goodness, Trent Hill, helping out behind the scenes. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. That is episode 9 of QBSN, the podcast in the books. Everybody, have an amazing week. Peace.